start with a new reveal that came out 30 minutes ago, and then we're going to cover everything that was kind of like going on since, alright? So let's go ahead and get it pulled up, alright? We're going to cover like all of the new Celestials. This is going to be an all-in-one. So, we have here, in just like the reveal today, a new keyword, Fury. When I kill a unit, grant me +1/+1. When I kill a unit. So this can be off of presumably an effect as well, but it has to be that unit's effect. So Herald of Dragons is specifically just, a dragon synergy, keyword. All it is 2 mana, dragon allies cost 1 less. They're adding a ton of new mechanics to this expansion. So far we have, hang on, what do we have? We have Daybreak, we have Nightfall, we have Spell Shield, we have Celestials, we have Invokes, we have Dragons. That's 6, although Invokes and Celestials are kind of the same things. We've got Behold, that's 7. Is that it? Is that 7? I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about Behold. But 7! And now Fury! And now 8! Look at that! Okay, let's take a deeper look and see what we've got going on here. So, here's a dragon, White Flame Protector, a 4/4/4 Fury. So when it kills something, it gets +1/+1. Woo! Pretty good. Pretty good. Overall, a 4-mana 4/4 stat line is actually just kind of an underrated thing. It's sort of weird because we've seen a 4-mana 4/4 before in a lot of different ways. You see it in, like, there's that deep 4-mana 4/4, which is, like, almost fits into deep. It was ran in some versions, but ultimately ended up getting cut out of most. So the dragon tag and, the additional Fury might be what it takes to push this card a little bit. It's a pretty good card. Fused Firebrand. It's a... sorry, these go a little fast. This is a 5-mana 5/5 that comes with Fury and Spell Shield? What? Whoa! Hang on a second. Is that right? Because that is Spell Shield. That is not for the round Spell Shield. We see cards that have Spell Shield on them. A lot of them say for the round, like the Shadow Isles one or Bastion. This Spell Shield is not for the round unless says otherwise. This is Spell Shield until it's popped. That is a pretty good card. That is a pretty good card. Compare this to Moose. Right. This is kind of crazy. But barrier units also only have barrier that round? Yeah, because barrier and Spell Shield are different keywords that do different things. Spell Shield doesn't last for the round. Barrier does. So, then we've got Screeching Dragon. 5 mana 4/5. And this one's Fury and Challenger. Also quite good. It's kind of hard to evaluate along the lines of the last one. I'm guessing Fused Firebrand is better, but I mean, to be honest, the Challenger matters. It depends on how many dragons you're going to want, and it's going to depend on how much you're going to want the stat line. You guys are pointing out that it's Demacia. Yeah, it's Demacia. So, is the dragon here? Sure. And we've got Dragon's Clutch. So, this is 3 mana burst, draw 2 different dragons, or grant dragon allies +1/+1. So, people are saying that the dragon archetype is going to be the bridged keyword between Demacia and Targon, and it's going to be linked by a Demacian champion called Shyvana, which apparently has some amount of dragon synergy. I think Shyvana is going to come in a later section of the set. Keep in mind that they're doing this thing where the expansion drops first, and then the set part 2, set part 3 drop on later dates. So, for example, in 2 months from now, Shyvana could come into the card pool, and that would allow this dragon archetype to have more synergy and be more of a thing. Right? So, from what I've seen, basically, just in terms of this Dragon's Clutch, this is kind of like Porosnax, except it has a nice second option, which is like if you don't really have the dragons, it allows you to draw them. And that's a pretty big deal. It's kind of like a much better Porosnax. And the ability to draw is huge. The ability to build around tutoring, potentially even, is huge. And also, we have this neat little thing, Herald of Dragons, for dragon allies, cost 1 less. Although this one isn't really going to be worth using. So, what I will say is, unless there is dragons that we haven't seen yet, for the most part, what we're looking at is probably a bit of an incomplete archetype. Really, like, people will mess around with it. There's not, unless we have not seen something specific yet. We are going to be needing more dragon synergy for this to make sense, right? Because the thing is, like, the only dragon synergy tie-ins we have got two. We've got Herald of Dragons, and we've got Dragon's Clutch. Because the synergy points are the ones that are actually scaling with the amount of dragons, and not the dragons themselves. Dragon's Clutch, some of you guys are pointing out, this one doesn't affect everywhere allies like Parosnax. So yeah, it's a lot more limited in that way. And the other thing is, like, for Herald of Dragons to be worth it, you'd actually have to play a bunch of dragon allies. This card is not that good. It looks probably a lot better than it is. When you're looking at this card, compare it to the, God, what is it called? The guy yesterday, the Allegiance that discounts Celestials by 1. That card was a lot better. It had a higher health, a more relevant stat line. It gave you a draw at the same time. It had, like, a built-in synergy that was a lot more accessible, right? So that was a really, really big deal. Heralds of Dragons will one day be good, but it needs more dragons in the game for this to make sense. Because you're going to have to play a lot of dragons for this to actually get its mana back. To be honest, I actually think, like, even if we have more dragons in the game, this card will likely not see play in dragon decks. It depends on exactly, like, when you're getting the dragons out. Like, when you look at this card, you might see it as, like, a mana positive discount card. Reasonably speaking, you'd have to play, like, 4 dragons for this to be worth it, right? That's a big issue. And the real potential of this card is to cheat them out in earlier turns than they should be allowed, right? That's the real potential. So, for example, being able to play Fused Firebrand on turn 4. Being able to play, you know, Screeching Dragon on turn 4. And that's nice, but it's just not quite worth it in the current card pool. So overall, I'm going to rate all of these dragons as, like, big potential cards, but I don't really see any of them seeing competitive play yet until Shyvana or some larger degree of synergy is in the game. Like, it's cute to imagine these kind of, like, vanilla high-level stat lines seeing play, and this one is maybe the closest because Spell Shield is just inherently scary. We can compare this to something like Radiant Guardian, which is another, like, 5/5/5 that has 2 keywords that sees play without synergy. But in reality, Radiant Guardian has 2 keywords that are sort of, like, a lot more nutty. Whereas, like, Firebrand's keywords are great if we have a way to actually abuse its Spell Shield parts, right? The Demacian one is nuts. It does affect Remembrance. That's a great point that the Demacian one is a Remembrance target. It is a 5 mana Demacia card, which means Remembrance will be able to pull this card. That's a big deal because this probably makes Remembrance a bit better. Like, this probably is actually a above average card for Remembrance to pull out at these stages of the game. Probably, for sure. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so, yeah, dragons, I think they're basically, with this, they're basically just teasing them. They're just showing us that in 2 months, we're probably going to have Shyvana package, and it's probably going to make a lot of sense. No ASOL today? There should be ASOL today. I expect ASOL might be the one coming in like 10 minutes. I don't know. We can go ahead and evaluate all the Celestial cards I missed out on. All the Celestial cards. Here we go, boys. All the Celestials. And when we evaluate all the Celestials, we're gonna have to go back and evaluate some of the invokes that we saw earlier, right? Some of the invokes that we saw earlier. Okay, Moonlight. 0 mana, reduce the cost of a card in hand by 1. Keep in mind you're gonna be getting this quite a bit off of the Sketchy Spacer, right? You're going to be getting it a lot, like, randomly. It's basically like a coin in Hearthstone. It's just like a cost reduction by 1. You can cheat out something like 1 mana early. That's a pretty big deal, right? That's a pretty big deal. This has, like, some major combo applications. It's pretty good. There's a decent chance you will want to use this. But for the most part, it's going to be hard evaluating these in a vacuum because none of them are main deckable and all of them are going to be situational. So instead of giving rankings, I'm just going to talk in a general sense about, like, how good they are, how often you're going to pick them, and what their applications are, which is kind of, when you think about it, the literal same exact thing as giving rankings. Okay. Moonstone's pretty good, right? It's something that it's situational. I think the idea of just, you know, being able to cheat out something by 1 mana is great. I mean, it's basically like new Innervate in Hearthstone after Innervate got nerfed and it still gets played. So that's pretty good, right? There's going to be a lot of situations where you're just going to want to cheat out something for the 1 mana early. It's not called Moonstone, Moonlight, whatever, guys. Guys, you know which card I'm talking about. There's not a card called Moonstone, and until there is, I'm fine to say Moonstone. Use Moonstone on Jigglypuff to evolve. Okay, the Serpent, 0 mana. The Serpent at 0 mana is a pretty good card. This is actually kind of a fantastic card. Again, you're going to get this off of Spacey Sketcher quite often. There's 8. It's a choose 3 of 8, so it's a, 37.5% chance. There is a 37.5% chance you will see this card off of your Spacey Sketcher, and you were probably going to click it basically every time. This is like you play Spacey Sketcher turn 1, and you're going to be looking for the Serpent to also play on turn 1, just to get in like that easy damage. It's got the challenger, so it's useful later. This is kind of a crazy card, right? This card represents the opportunity for Celestials to be built as aggro. Now that we've seen all the Celestials, I think that's a meme. It seems unimaginable trying to run Celestials as aggro in any way at all. Any way at all. Its attack stat line does kind of help, like, you know, it does help level the ASOL a bit. That's kind of cute. And, you know, it's a 1 mana Celestial, which means, and this is important because most invokes are going to be pulling random things from this entire screen, all the way from 0 mana to 10 mana. They will be pulling random things from the entire screen. You will often need this, A, just if you need a cheap unit, but B, if you're trying to enable the Skies Descend, this is a 1 mana Celestial that you will often pick just for the sake of the Skies Descend, if that's in your hand, okay? So keep that in mind. Even though this card isn't really Pog, like, you're not really playing the Charger for anything about it specifically, the mere fact that it is a 1 mana Celestial will mean this is a common pick. You will end up picking this card a lot, just because, like, you're going to get packs with clunky or situational stuff, and you're going to get pigeonholed into this. I will say, I think you're probably going to get pigeonholed with Invoke a lot, right? The way that these cards are designed and the way that most invokes, we've seen a few more invokes here, but most invokes are random between this entire list of like 22, 23, 24 cards. Half of the, like, most of the packs you're going to see are going to not really have modality to them. You're often going to see like an Equinox, the Immortal Fire, and a Charger, and then you're going to be like, okay, I guess I'm picking the Charger. So I don't love that about how the entire Invoke package comes together, right? Okay, but you'll pick the Charger a lot. Moonglow, 2 mana, slow, grant an ally +2/+0, and Spell Shield. This card is very good. This card is one of the stronger ones here. Again, it's very situational, like Equinox. Very situational. But in the situations where, you know, you have the ability to just like keep something alive in some kinds of like all-in decks, the idea of giving something permanent Spell Shield is pretty good, right? This card I don't think is like nuts. You're going to skip this a lot. This card is going to have a really low pick rate, right? And I want to clarify that, because when we're talking about how good or bad these cards are, it's important to like break down what we mean by that. Because the Charger, I was saying, isn't really a great card, but it's going to have a really high pick rate. And if we're defining cards, if we're defining Celestials by their pick rate, then the Charge is really good and Moonglow is really bad. But what Moonglow will offer is a very unique angle to the game, which is to say there will be some situations where you'll be able to scoop up Moonglow for potentially game-winning value, right? It does something completely unique, which is give something Spell Shield that's slow speed. So I shouldn't say this is very good. When I initially looked, I think I used those words exactly, it's not very good, but this is a card that I think people are underrating at least. You're going to skip this most of the time because the median case value for this card, the median case situation dictates, yeah, this card looks like a skip. But when we look at the mean, when we look at the cases where this card spikes in value, when it pops, it can generate some sort of like auto-win style situations when you're building, like for example, something like an all-in Braum deck, or a lot of like, some of these even Thresh concepts will often be picking up Moonglow, right? So this is going to be a somewhat common pick. It's really not bad, but yeah, I shouldn't have said it's very good. Okay. The Messenger. The Messenger's pretty good. It's an alright card. It's, you know, it's a draw. It's a 2-mana 2/2. I think this is one of the better ones. The thing is, again, sort of like the Charger, most of these things you're gonna see, a lot of the times you're gonna be just like seeing some random bad cards that you can't really play, and you know, your eyes scan left to right. You know, you're working on milliseconds. You're just like literal. You know, you see the reds. The reds are, you know, it's how it's gonna be is you're gonna be in like these mid-game scenarios where you're about to die, right? And your eyes are literally just going to see colors, right? When you hit the pack, when you see your 3 cards, you're gonna be like, oh god, red, and then in like 50 milliseconds later, you're gonna see a Messenger on the right side, and you're gonna get a spark of dopamine because it just salvaged your pack from being fucking Immortal Fire and Supernova, and you're good. That's great, right? So yeah, I mean the Messenger's good in that way, right? It salvages otherwise bricked packs. It's an unbricker. You'll pick it a lot for the same exact reason you'll pick Charger a lot. This will very rarely be the best card you're looking for, but it will basically very reliably be like 3rd, 4th choice, and that's great to see. Like, you're never gonna be sad to see it. So yeah, Messenger's great. Super solid card. Okay. Next up, we're just gonna keep going basically left to right. Crescent Strike, 3 mana, stun 2 enemies. This one's quite interesting, especially when we're considering the fact that this can be gotten off of Sketcher. I love the fact that this card is in the pool. I really love the fact that this card is in the pool. So part of what makes Discover, I think, an interesting concept is the ability to sort of hand read your opponent. Here's a really important tip. I don't know if these long-term competitive decks will be running Spacey Sketcher, but super important tip. When you see people Spacey Sketcher and they don't play Serpent, Charger, or Messenger, or Joker in the first 3 turns, you should assume that their card is Crescent Strike, okay? You should assume that their card is Crescent Strike. And that's cool, because you're deducing their hand, you're like, okay, their card's probably Crescent Strike, I'm gonna have to open attack so I don't get mega punished by this, right? Here's something that's also very cool, and this will only happen at a high level, like Masters, but this is actually very doable, which is the idea of bluffing. Absolutely. Absolutely, you have the ability to pick something like the Charger and not play it, and force your opponent into feeling like they have to open attack, because you could have Crescent Strike. This is not the kind of bluffing we've seen in the game before, right? That's like, the thing is, the bluffing that we've seen in the game before has all been like really, really fringe, because you can't really communicate to the opponent that there's enough likelihood of you having X in your hand off of a read, just because of the probability of you naturally drawing any given card in your deck is low, right? So like, we've never really had the opportunity to properly bluff in Runeterra before. Really, we haven't, right? So because like, you know, if you're trying to bluff like Deny, that's not a bluffable spot. We meme about like making like the probabilistic call to be like, okay, I'll float the mana so my opponent will think I have this. That's never really been like doable except in insanely niche situations, like literally like 1 in 5,000 games or something like that, right? That's not really too much of a thing. This is going to be much more common. Absolutely. People are going to figure out very quickly that Crescent Strike is a 37.5% chance off of Spacey Sketcher, and what that means is if you're against aggro and you hit the Charger, you should not play it. Usually, they often will not be able to play into your Crescent Strike if you don't show them which card you got. That's big. That's a really big deal, because you're telling your opponent, I have insanely boosted odds of having like any given specific card that you will have to respect. Then we've got the Joker. The Joker is just an elusive. I mean, you're gonna try to ass pull this when your opponent has like when your opponent has elusives. You're looking for elusive blockers, or when your opponent has like low HP and maybe you can just like ass pull a win. Make sure to equip the Braum emote so that when your 2 HP opponent stares down a fucking literal like turn 7 spacey sketcher, you can Braum like 5 times before you play your Joker and end the game. I don't know. I mean, what more is there to say about this? It's like, it's kind of just like ass pull lethal or ass pull clock block and nowhere in between. Okay, written in the stars. Draw a champion, reduce its cost by 1 and grant it +2/+2. So this was my revealed card. Basically, the idea I have behind this card, you can run it with the Thresh Asol concept. I think the biggest potential this card has is Braum. I think legitimately, you could build an entire deck around just getting a buffed Braum. And we'll have to math out the odds of getting that buffed Braum. But this is going to be a lot more competitive than it seems. I promise you guys that. I'm not saying this is going to be tier 1, but the identity of a deck that literally just basically arranges like 70 to 75% odds of a turn 4 2/7 Braum hitting the board is a really, really, really big deal. Period. Right? Like, you will have better odds than it seems. I'll have to math it out entirely. And I will be mathing it out when we actually like build the deck. My problem with invokes, to summarize, is very, 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 very simple. I think that more invokes should be limited ranges and less invokes should be invoke any card. Period. I think that would be a big improvement to this concept. Invoke any card operates on a bell curve and is aimed at low cost naturally. Are you saying this is not an even distribution? Low cost Celestials are about as 5 times as likely to appear as 10 cost from Invoke Any Far. So this is a Rioter in chat. A Riot developer for this game in chat is confirming that low cost Celestials are about 5 times as likely to appear as 10 cost from Invoke Any card. So he's saying that he said bell curve, but he meant a power law curve. And this brings me back to Meteor Shower, right? This brings me back to, like, you know, when the opponent plays Solari Priestess, I will have to think, okay, there's a legitimate chance they have Meteor Shower in their hands. And as they play the next 2 turns, that chance will either go up or go down. It will actually basically only go up because it can really only go down when it goes to 0, which means they played a different card. But the number is going to change, and we will kind of have to keep... It's hand reading. That's interesting. That's cool, right? And you can also even read a little bit, and I know this sounds like a meme, but legitimately, how long your opponent takes to pick their Discover card will actually be a read opportunity. Like, seriously. This will change the math on some things. That's cool. I wish that there were more cards that represented, like, that kind of narrow range. Overall, Meteor Shower, there's not too much to do with this one. Where is it, dude? He's a 5/5/5 challenger. What more can you say about a 5/5/5 challenger? If you need a 5/5/5 challenger, click on this card. That's it. There's really not much to say about this. There really isn't. Comets, or something along those lines. Comets is going to be this idea of obliterate an enemy.
Games are random by nature.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So Comets is a slow, apparently it's just 6 mana, obliterate an enemy. So it's just like, I'm just gonna delete you. And it works on champions, according to this translation, which I have no reason to doubt. So it's basically like Vengeance, except it's an obliterate instead of a kill for the downslide / upside of being -1 mana, but at slow speed. Now, slow speed is a big deal, like a really big deal. Better Sunburst. Oh, this is a much better Sunburst. A much, much, much better Sunburst. I guess, yeah, this is a better Sunburst. What? I guess Sunburst goes through Spell Shield, kind of, and this one doesn't.
Still on the same card. Thank you for the milk, Daddy.
No problem. No problem, dude. I appreciate it. Alright, so basically, yeah, it's a pretty good card, Comets. You're gonna see this one a lot. You're gonna have to be scared of this one a lot. And this is also a very bluffable spot, right? Like, if my opponent is playing Nautilus, like, let's say they're playing a deep deck because they didn't get the memo that Dragon Daddy is just, like, fucking juicy or deep. So, let's say they're playing a deep deck, and I play Solari Priestess, right? I'm representing a... I was gonna say 50%, because in theory it should be exactly 50%, but apparently it's weighted in a way that makes it not exactly 50%. It'll probably be very close to 50%. So, I will have a bluffable opportunity, right? They will have to be scared of Comets if I decide, like, if I see something else and I just don't play it, they'll have to be scared of comets. They might not be able to play the Nautilus. That's kind of cool. You know, there's a lot of like interesting plays this enables. The one thing about this one is it's kind of a dunker, dude. Like, there's gonna be a lot of strats that might just kind of come down to like whether the opponent hit their comets off of the invokes. And this is like, I don't know. I will say, I like RNG. I think there's a lot of ways RNG is good, and I think there's a lot of ways RNG is bad. And I do think that Runeterra fundamentally needs a higher amount of RNG than it has in the live build right now, in some ways. But honestly, even given that, I don't know if I like this. I don't know. I'm envisioning so many games will just like, there's gonna be a lot that just comes down to like, uh-oh, did the opponent get the comet? Did the opponent get the fucking equinox? Like, comet is the first one that I look at that's just like a fucking, this one's a crazy upset, man. This one's just like, this one is so often going to be the difference between whether a game is won or lost. Okay, Golden Sister and Silver Sister. So basically, it's a 6-mana unit that one of them, it's 2 units, and one of them is lifesteal and one of them is elusive. The two forces in the universe. This is the fucking, truly the yin and yang, the good and evil of existence. The fucking, the age-old dichotomy. The lifesteal versus the elusive. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. So yeah, I mean, one of them is just gonna steal life and one of them is just gonna fuck you up. This card's quite good. You're gonna play this a lot. You're gonna be very happy to hit this a lot. Like, at 6 mana, this card's like, it's sort of insane, actually, a little bit. It also double counts as Celestials, which is really important for the sake of that one big daddy spell that I can't remember the name of, but the one that counts your Celestials. This one is like 2 Celestials for 6 mana, which is pretty great, and 1 card, of course. Yeah, you'll pick this a lot. This card's amazing. Cosmic Inspiration, 7 mana, slow. If you behold a Celestial card, give all allies everywhere +2/+2 and restore spell mana? What? So this one just kind of has to be clunky, right? How do you behold a Celestial card? You just have to have any Celestial card in hand. So this is like a second Celestial. You can play this quite early, man. Like, there's nothing really stopping you from playing this on turn 4. Like, this will be a fairly common turn 4 play. The question is, like, do Celestials want to play for stats? This is the big question. Because this card is actually, like, potentially really powerful. It's basically potentially a... At best, if we assume a best case scenario, it is a 4 mana, give everything +2/+2. If you're assuming the Behold works, and if you're assuming you can play this on turn 4, and it can restore your spell mana, right? So, I mean, that's the best case scenario, which is, of course, kind of nuts. A little bit. So yeah, Cosmic Inspiration is pretty good. You can run this in, like, potentially the Braum deck, I guess. I don't know if I would. I mean, you can't main deck this, but the question is, like, how often are you actually picking it, right? That's what we mean by run. Like, what would have to happen for me to see it here? Overall, I think Cosmic Inspiration is a little baity. I think that, again, the big thing to understand is, like, Celestials probably don't want to be playing for, like, any sort of more late game, like, per turn value kind of concept. But also, I think they're pretty independent from the idea of, like, stats in general, right? I could see this working in, like, an Elusives deck. I could maybe see something like that happening. But yeah, overall, this is kind of nuts. It says give. It is kind of weird that it says give. Because I'm pretty sure it means grant. I'm pretty sure this is meant to be a permanent buff because it applies to everywhere and because it's like, because of how it's priced. I'm very confident that this is a permanent buff. It's just a mistranslation. But either way, still a little too slow and clunky for what Celestials actually want and need. They want to be able to survive the early game, and they're usually ending the game in ways that are sort of departed from the idea of stats in general. Okay, so the Destroyer. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 for each Celestial card you've played this game. Isn't it a better... Okay, so, I mean, we could think about running it in Elusives, because some people are saying, isn't this a better Encroaching Shadows? Kind of. It's better with, like, 6 asterisks. It's in a, probably, I would say, a worse region for elusives, although that's debatable. It has an upfront behold. It's a slow speed, so it takes an action. It costs more mana up front, and even outside of the upfront cost, it also has the downside of returning it to you in spell mana, which means if you wanted to play units, it actually just costs 7 mana, which is like kind of crazy. It could be right. So next up, we've got the Destroyer. 7 mana, 7/7. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 for each Celestial card you play this game. Okay. Interesting, interesting. Overwhelm and Spell Shield. So basically this card is just big, right? This card is like a bit of a big daddy finisher, and he actually looks a little scary. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you guys know I don't like big and clunky cards, and you guys know I don't like late game cards that put too much of their value into stats. But I'm gonna be real with you. Looking at this card, I see a lot of good things. I see a card that has Spell Shield and Overwhelm. That's good. The Overwhelm gives it the ability to actually make the stats meaningful, and the built-in Spell Shield protection is great, right? Great. Amazing, right? It's not going to have as much attack as something like a They Who Endure, but reasonably speaking, it's very likely going to come onto the board as something like a Darius. Think about this like a Darius. It will basically always have like 10 attack. It's never going to have a ton, right? Like, at most, it'll have like maybe 12. I think that this is like one of the better late-game cards that we have seen in Celestials, right? And you're gonna have to play very flexibly. You will go out of your way for this card if your hand lacks a finisher, and you will be having to resist the temptation of going for this card if your hand already has a finisher. All right, this is a really important thing. Rule number 1 with this card, like whenever you see it, just like plan a few turns ahead and think, do I need a finisher or do I have a finisher? And you'll pick this card if you need a finisher. Every time. It's great. Super good. Okay. Tomb of the Universe. 8 mana slow. If you behold Celestial card, obliterate all units with 3 or less power. So, can we confirm this is a translated? Is it a mistranslation, or does it mean all units? Does this obliterate followers only, or does it actually work on champions? Does this actually work on champions? Is all enemy units? Okay, we have full confirmation. We have, like, Chinese, Mandarin experts in chat confirming without a shadow of a doubt it is all units. Okay. So, this one's pretty good. Basically, it's going to be meta dependent, right? But you're going to see it sometime. This card will hit spots, will hit metas, right? At this stage in the game, usually the board is going to be like beefier units. Like, when you want to kill units that have 3 or less power, this is usually going to be a sweeper against stuff like, for example, like aggro stuff. Usually when you're trying to bomb out mid-range, they're going to have a lot of 4 and 5 attack units. So this card will often be skipped for sure, but you'll see this sometimes. For like, there will be some situations where you'll see this and you'll be like, wow, that's neat. Overall, honestly, it's not that great. The more I look at it, the worse it's getting. It's like, you will pick it sometimes and it will be like an ass pound blowout sometimes, but it would take a pretty specific board state. Okay, the Immortal Fire. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 for each Celestial card you play this game, and the first time I would die, fully heal me instead, and it's elusive. What? That's pretty good. That is pretty good. Wow, man. It's a little crazy. I would say it is probably going to be on a fairly similar level to the Destroyer. I want to make that clear. I actually think, like, okay, this card's good and the Destroyer's good. They're both sweet finishers. I think that when you first look at this card, it's easy to think that it's, like, much better than the Destroyer in every way. And I don't think that's true, actually. I think that this card might actually be a bit worse than the Destroyer. They're about the same. They're about the same. So, several points. Rapid fire. So first of all, this card costs 1 more mana, has 1 less base attack. Those both matter. I would say a really big thing that's going on here, though, is that, okay, let's list, first of all, get it out of the way. Overwhelm, when you have this kind of strategy, usually the way Celestials are playing out, you don't often need to be ending the game with your unit, right? Not on that turn. which Overwhelm is kind of better at the idea of just making sure I have the stats, I have the chonker, and I will close out the game within a couple of turns. Whereas Immortal Fire, when you're playing for elusives, you're mostly just trying to go for a grab at ending the game there and then, which is not really going to be happening here. But a really, really big thing that's going on, first of all, the mana cost is huge. Keep in mind, these are curved cards. Absolutely. You will find this card on like turn 6, and you will want to pick the Destroyer because that's the one you can play next turn. That's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. And a really, really big deal is, I think when you look at it, so this text, the first time I would die, fully heal me instead. I suspect that this is weaker than Spell Shield. They are... It depends on exactly like what's going to be happening, like in the metagame. Sometimes this will be stronger than Spell Shield, and sometimes it's going to be weaker. Here's the big problem with this effect, which is that it doesn't really work as well against, like, there's a lot of things that will bypass the death, like anything that obliterates, anything that returns the hand, anything that stuns. Stun is a big one. Stun is a huge one, right? That's going to be very common. So, like, I think I would rather have Spell Shield on average. So the more I think about it, I think the more the Destroyer is actually probably a bit of a better card on average. But that doesn't really matter because they're both great finishers, and reasonably speaking, it's going to be extremely rare that you see both of them and you're actually forced to choose between them. Reasonably speaking, they're both great cards. You're going to pick the one you see if you need that kind of thing. Frostbite 2? Yeah, Frostbite 2. I just, like, don't get baited into this text. Don't get baited into the first time I would die, fully human instead. That's not as good text as it seems. It's not as good text as it seems. And then finally, we've got the idea of like elusive chump blockers. Overwhelm goes through chump blockers, whereas the Immortal Fire will still get a bit blocked out by any sort of elusive chump blockers. I'm not imagining there being a ton, but that matters too. Okay, Supernova. If you behold a Celestial card, obliterate 2 enemies. What the hell? That could be pretty good. There's going to be a lot of board states where this is nuts. Overall, this is worse than Comet. Reasonably speaking, you're going to see Comet being a cancer card much more often. The distribution of things is going to make you see Comet much more often. Well, that's... You can't get Comet off of, like, Assault or the spell that gets 7+. But, yeah, Comet's going to be much more common, I think. And Comet's going to be much stronger. Reasonably speaking, the amount of board states where you need to obliterate both enemies are kind of low. It's like, you look at Comet, it's like, they play one big thing, it's done. It's dead, right? Like, they're going to need protection. They're going to need to, like... They're going to need to have the ability to keep Brown, you know, with Spell Shield. If they play Leviathan, you Comet it, you know, and it's like, yeah, Supernova could have killed this one too, but the whole point is you kind of only really need to kill the Leviathan, right? So Supernova is clunkier, you do have to have the Behold, and it's a lot more kind of like, oftentimes, you're not even necessarily going to need both Obliterates, but obviously it will still come in big for value on certain board states. The Great Beyond, the 9 mana Big Daddy, here we go. We're getting to the real fucking big boys, guys. The Great Beyond. 9 mana, 8/8, it's got Elusive, it's got Fury, and it's got Spell Shield. Alright? When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 for each Celestial card you've played. I am a dragon. Okay. I understand now the meme. That's... I get it. I get it. I am a dragon. That's a good meme. It's just kind of like a funny thing to say. So many people in chat were posting all day, I am a dragon smiley face. And, like, I had no idea what, I didn't know where that was from. It's just, like, I thought it was just, like, a quirky thing from a voice line. It's a big boy. It's a true big boy. It's a 9 mana. It's got the best part of the Immortal Fire. It's got the best part of the Destroyer, which is Spell Shield. It's got Fury, which is honestly kind of shit. Fury on a 9 mana finisher is going to do literally nothing. But there are some cards that interact with some Fury cards, so that's kind of okay. Oh, honestly, how valuable is the dragon keyword? How valuable is the dragon keyword? Do we have confirmation that this will double discount the Sky's Descend for each dragon or celestial ally you have? It's very interpretable both ways. You can interpret this as a single discount or a double discount because it's one unit that's giving both tags, right? So I don't know if we have confirmation on exactly how that works. I don't know if it matters too much since this is like a 10 mana card. It probably only counts 1 per unit, not tags. Yeah, unless we have confirmation, it's really hard to even like kind of like surmise that. Like that's just guesswork at that point, really. So the Great Beyond honestly doesn't strike me as that good. It's like, when you compare it to the Destroyer or the Immortal Fire, I think it's probably just too expensive compared to those, honestly. Like, you're not really getting enough for that payment. The dragon, so what dragon synergy do we even have in the game? Dragons help discount the big one. The dragons themselves can get discounted by the, like the little dragon girl. And I guess they can be drawn by egg, but this isn't going to be in your deck. So that's basically it, right? Isn't that it? So, yeah, the Great Beyonds, I see this kind of like, you're not really getting much compared to the Destroyer or the Immortal Fire, and it costs a lot more. I want to clarify on this. Something that's like really, really, really important to understand is how exponential mana costs get around these numbers. When you get to the 7 mana, 8 mana, 9 mana, each increment of a single mana at this stage in the game, based on how these go, is really, 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 really important. Like, so, do you guys remember when Rasa was 7 mana and it was the craziest 3-of auto-include meta definer ever? And then it got nerfed to 8 mana and it never saw play after that? And there are additional arguments, don't get me wrong, Rasa was an exploitative strategy, and so it was going to lower play rate a little bit, regardless of that nerf, but still, like, that is crazy, right? So, the same thing are happening here. Let me explain this in a kind of a more intuitive way, which is like, okay, let's assume the game is ending on turn 10, which is not always, but even depending, like, let's say it ends on either 9 or 10, okay? When you compare a 7 to 8 mana card to a 9 mana card, you're getting the difference of 2 attacks versus 1 attack. That's a really, really, really huge deal. That's a really, really, really huge deal. Okay, Living Legends. So this is the upper right. Living Legends. It is a So Fort. It looks like that part didn't get translated. It's a 10 mana burst speed spell. Fill your hand with random fleeting celestial cards. Fill your mana. Holy shit. That's crazy. That is absolute. Is that random fleeting celestial cards? And it just gives you the mana to use them. So basically, you're just getting the flexibility to kind of use this 10 mana however you want. It's like a wild card. It's nuts with Assault too. This one's absolutely crazy with Assault too. Man, in a way, this is kind of like, I mean, when you're at this mana point, this will kind of be like the best one, right? This will kind of be like the best one because it's just flexible. It's like you're paying 10 mana, but you get a lot more optionality over playing like a bunch of little cards, and you get to choose exactly how they're gonna go. Obviously, it's really expensive. In most games, you're not really going to like see it too much, but like the flexibility is super important with this. When you're in games that make it to like this turn state, it's a better treasure. It's kind of like a treasure on steroids. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a treasure on steroids. Okay. It's burst, therefore it's good. So for the most part, this card doesn't really benefit that much from being burst. Because you kind of have to like play the units anyway. It just makes it undeniable. Fills your entire mana pool, so I mean, you can use this as a plus mana card. It fills not just your normal mana, but your spell mana too, right? So if you play this card in a late turn, on turn 8, 9, or 10, this card can sometimes literally give mana. If you play like a cheap card before it. Jesus. So yeah, it's really good. You're gonna use it a lot. Like, if you're in the stage of the game where you can use this card, you probably will go for it. It'll usually be better than what else you're seeing, right? And of course it's nuts with Assault, because Assault's flip discounts your Celestial cards. It gives you odds to use Behold Celestial cards with non-hand. Yes, exactly. That too. That's a good point as well. If you play this on 7, do you get a 10 mana gems? I would be pretty surprised if it didn't refill your spell mana. That would not make very much sense to me. I'm pretty sure it refills all of your mana. I'm pretty sure this is mana positive if you play it at like... If you play a 3 mana card and then this on turn 10, it probably is mana positive. Now, I think that is not going to be as strong as it sounds like it would be. I don't think that really would be that strong, but that should be how it works. Can it create itself? if this translation is correct, you know, we have this keyword other, random other fleeting celestial cards. If this keyword, if in the original German it said the keyword for German for other, then it would not be able to get itself. And if it doesn't, it can get itself if we just the wording. But I don't think that really changes this card's evaluation. Reasonably speaking, it's just like if you're in the late game and you can click on this card, you will go ahead and scoop for it. Like it's a great card. It's definitely one of the best high-end ones. This is probably the best expensive card. Like when you compare it to like these big units as well, even. Like when you are in the game of mana conversion and when you convert that mana to a higher degree of optionality and a higher amount of mana spent on other units, this card's probably like the best late game for this deck. But I haven't seen the last one yet. Let's read it. The Scourge. The Scourge. Challenger. A 10 mana 10/10. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 for every celestial card you play this game. And attack, give other allies +2/+2 and overwhelm this round. So this card's poop. Got it. Great. Good to know. I mean, what else is there to say about this card? The Scourge is basically like, I mean, it doesn't really have the ability to like end the game too much on its own. It's an easy ASO level up. The problem is you often won't be in the market for needing the ASO level up in this degree. Like it's gonna be really rare that your board state is ASO and this card. Like ASO doesn't really need help leveling up. Okay, so let's take a look at Asol, and let's take a look at like how his level up works, right? So Asol is a 10 mana 10/10, and his round end your allies have 20 plus total power. So he's the first 10, you only need the second 10, and reasonably speaking, it's like, I mean, anything else will help your Asol level up. Usually you're gonna have like a few units on boards already, not necessarily like a full board, but a couple. Like having 10 extra power spread across the rest of your board is very easy, and especially when you like, you know, when you weigh it with temporary value, like all of your top end Celestials are going to be doing this. The Scourge is just kind of awkward. Like you want your big unit to be something that has the ability to close out games. This one is dependent on you having a board, which is something that the Destroyer, the Immortal Fire are not dependent on. Living Legends is not dependent on. So yeah, the Scourge is probably the worst one out of all these big ones. I would say like what you're going to be, let me go ahead and fix my graphic here. What you're going to be wanting to go for in the late game, I think, and this might surprise some people. The first one's not going to surprise anyone. Probably the best late game card out of these is Living Legends. I think this one's kind of an auto if you're in the late game. It's just really good. I would say the second best out of these like 8 late game ones, if we're considering 7+ mana, the second best one I think is the Destroyer. That is probably going to be surprising. I think a lot of these other cards like the Immortal Fire, the Great Beyond, the Scourge might have the propensity to look better, but you're often going to be wanting to be playing on like the turn 7, turn 8. I've already talked about like why Spell Shield is maybe better than what the Immortal Fire gives you. I don't really like the elusive keyword as much in this kind of deck. This is not really the kind of deck that values the elusive keyword quite so much. And the Scourge is like, it's so idealistic, it's clunky, it requires you to have like a board to get value. It itself doesn't give itself Overwhelm, which is, if it gave itself Overwhelm, we'd be having a different conversation. But like, it's just like clunky and awkward. And, you know, I mean, the Destroyer and the Immortal Fire are also going to have 10 attacks. So even if you did need a single unit to level up Asol, which you're probably not going to, you know, those are going to do the same thing. So overall, Immortal Fire is kind of a bit worse than the Destroyer. The Great Beyond's probably a bit worse than the Immortal Fire. And, you know, I mean, when we get to the cheaper cards, you know, the 6 mana unit, that's great as well. You know, the Golden Sister and the Silver Sister. So when we're looking for these kind of like expensive, you know, big celestial units to slam, I'm going to be really looking at the Destroyer and like Golden Sister. Those are, if we're considering Golden Sister to be in the big range, she's kind of medium, but that's going to be what I'm going to want for like that point in the game, mostly. Cosmic Inspiration is kind of like baity, not really going to be, I don't think, effective. We can try running this in like an elusive concept. You know, anything that buffs everything everywhere, it's like I can make Degenerate with elusives. We will see. I think that this is not better than Encroaching Shadows. Honestly, it looks like it might be better in some ways, but it has like so many asterisks on top of that.